Okay, moving right along, let's start in with JDBC. And this is still lecture 1, it's slide number 58. I have an entire lecture on JDBC that follows this one. But it's different content than what's in here. And then I have some examples that I'm going to show you in a Windows environment. And I'll also point you to the videos for how to install the Java EE, the JDBC drivers, as well as Oracle, actually. You do have to install a lot of software for this course, I should say, but it's stuff that you'll be using as a developer if you actually get into this. So it's not a bad idea to have a nice little development system set up that has Oracle on it and has the drivers and everything. So JDBC is used for database connectivity, as it might imagine. Java database connectivity consists of a set of interfaces whose methods can be used to connect to and access data within the relational database model using SQL as a query language, SQL. Can't talk today. So the methods of these JDBC interfaces are defined in the following UML diagram, and here we go. And if you understand that, you understand JDBC. No, actually the thing is, this is kind of confusing, so I'm going to go through each one of the driver issues, connectivities and functionalities, I guess is the word I was looking for, and explain it to you in a lot more detail. But there's a package, and the only thing really to get out of this slide is the fact that we have a package, Java SQL, and we have a package com.mysql.jdbc. I'm not going to use that in my examples. I'm actually going to use the Oracle system with the Oracle driver that's downloadable from the Oracle website, which is a little bit easier to actually kind of use in concept. There's no setup or anything. But we'll see how this actually works as we go through it. And what I want to do in this particular slide set before I actually show you the examples is talk about the concept a little bit. And there's source code examples in this lecture that I'm not going to go over in a very much detail. I'd rather wait and show you it live in a real source code example. But the purpose of this lecture is actually to show you how to connect to the database and the features of the connectivity that we're looking at. So the first step when we start using JDBC is to load the driver that you're going to use into the JVM. You do that actually by going and, here we go, that's what I wanted. If we, I thought I had Firefox. I do have Firefox. Let me go here, a new window. If we go out to, let's say for example, the Oracle site, in fact, let's just go here, download. There's an entire video on this actually. The version of Oracle that you're going to be using for this class is going to be the Express version unless you have a full license, full paid for, which is a couple $1,000s, which you probably don't have. So what you're going to be downloading is the Oracle XE version. It is absolutely free, yes.
So we can install it.
You can install it absolutely free. You can run it for absolutely free. There are some limitations. Only one user at a time can be logged into it. And the database only, I believe, holds like 500 megabytes or something of data. There's a limitation. All of the features are the same. Yeah, I'm sorry?
What about the project assignment you gave?
It's okay.
It's okay.
The projects, yeah, the project assignment that I assign is not going to go exceed the limitations of the Oracle database. In the video that I created, and the links for the video, and let me just open up a new tab here. What you're going to want to do to get this working is you're going to go to bhacker.com, or you're going to go to the YouTube website directly if you want, and you go into, and I just put these links in today actually, so the links are brand new. The Java EE install is a must. Yeah. You've got to also install Oracle, and these are two new links I just put in here for the JDBC and for the Oracle system. I'm pointing this out just to kind of let you know because it's not as clear-cut as you'd think actually. On an XP system, I don't recommend putting on the 11G actually. I had better luck and when I tested it, and although I am running it in a virtual machine on a MacBook using Parallels, I could not get the 11G drivers, and I could not get the 11G database service to run. It was having memory issues. It was taking up too much memory. I noticed that the 10G ran a lot faster, and it was easier to start and stop. And it actually, my system ran faster with it loaded.
Windows 7?
For Windows 7, you might be able to use 11G. In fact, 11G, I believe, is probably optimized for Windows 7. and not for XP. So if you're on an antiquated old system like me, you want to use this link right here. You download that, you run through the install. It's fairly simple. After you download either 10 or 11, you're going to want to also download the ODBC driver. So download Oracle ODBC driver. If you just do a simple Google search on download Oracle, and this is also in the video as well, so a lot more detail as well. It's not going to be as, I'm just giving you a quick overview of what you need to do. If you click on the Oracle ODBC driver download, you want the Oracle download. This is a different page. This is ODBC. I'm sorry, I meant to say JDBC. And I typed in ODBC. I was thinking ODBC when I said JDBC. JDBC is what we want. If we go to this one, even if you have installed the 10G, this is the correct page by the way, even if you have 10G, you still want the 11G driver. Because here's the situation that you're going to run into. If you've installed the current version of the Java EE, you have the JDK 1.7. 1.7 is not going to work with the 10G driver set. It only works with the 11G driver set. And on the 11G, the other interesting thing to note is that the driver is mentioned here, not on this screen, but if you look at some of the details of the driver, this one here, it says it goes up to 1.6. You actually have 1.7. It works with 1.6 though. So it works with this driver here is the one you want. It's called OJ. It's ODBC and JDBC all in one. OJDBC6.jar is the one you want, and that one is going to work with 10G or 11G on XP or Windows 7 with 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7 of the JDK. If you got all that, you're in good shape. If not, you're going to be spending an hour or so trying to figure out why isn't it loading? Why isn't it loading?
The other one.
No, this one works. This one right here.
Oh, this one is for.
It works. This driver right here. I tested it myself. Actually, I did it as recently as last night. Actually, this driver works with 10G. It works with 11G on Oracle. It works with the JDK 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. On my system, which I just installed about a week ago, I got the latest and greatest beta 1.7 of the JDK, and it works with it. And in fact, that's what I have on my system. And when I go to demo the software for you, I'll show you how it works. But it's kind of confusing, you know, all the different versions and everything. And the interesting thing is if you go to the page here, this is the Oracle Database 11G Release 1 JDBC drivers. If you try to install the 10G, because you think, you know, I have 10G, not going to work, which is the most bizarre thing in the world. You'd think 10G drivers would work with 10G database. Not the case, actually. In fact, it was a nightmare. I couldn't figure it out. And finally, I went, oh, let me just try the 11G. And accidentally, it worked. I'm like, wow, 11G works with 10G. Okay. And I think it's probably because of the Java, the 1.7. And if you look at the 10G drivers, we didn't have 1.7 back then. In fact, we didn't have 1.6 back then either. We only had 1.5. So I suspect if you run into this problem, the other choice may have been to download an older version of the JDK and work with 1.5 with the 10G driver. That probably works just fine. But the situation was that the JDK is more updated than the 10G driver, but the 11G driver supports it. So if you got all that, you're in good shape. And if you didn't get all that, you can get it at a lot slower pace by watching these videos. Or if you go to the YouTube website, you'll see links to the same video, and they'll be in the Java EE programming playlist. Alright, so let's go back to the lecture. And that was the 2 bullet points I just went through on essentially what you need to install. Some of the examples are going to use MySQL. The process is identical. In fact, the reason why I installed Oracle is because the lecture set, both lecture sets use MySQL, so I'm giving you both. So if you want to use MySQL, follow the statements that are in the lecture set. And as an example here it says com.mysql.jdbc.driver. The Oracle one is going to say Oracle instead of MySQL. So it's pretty easy. The statements themselves are all the same. The process are all the same. The commands, the methods, everything's identical, which is great. You just swap the database, swap the driver, and you have a program that works with a different database. The same identical program without any reprogramming. So the first step is to load the driver. And once you have the driver loaded, and the other thing, I guess while I'm talking about it, the other thing to note with the driver, which is, and I'll go to a Windows system here to show you what I'm talking about, is that in Windows, there is no install for the driver. When you download the driver, you're going to get a jar file. And when you get the jar file, all you do is copy the jar file into a directory location, and the directory location, you want to make a mental note of this, is going to be in the path for your other jar files for the JRE, the Java Runtime Environment, not the JDK. Yeah, because it's really the runtime environment in the JVM that is loading this driver and looking for this driver. So if you go into, and I just named my directory Java, it is in the, I put it in the program files, I called it Java here. And if I go into Java, I've got my JDK, my JRE. You really want to go into the JRE of the JDK. Yeah, because this one here is for the web supports, for web browsers and stuff. So you really want to go into this one right here. And you want to go into lib for library files. It's not a binary, it's a library. And you put it in the exe directory. So here's my driver right here actually. That's the one that I'm using. And it is in the ext extension directory, which JDBC is an extension off of the core library system. So it really does belong right here. You can get away with putting it in other locations as long as you have it in the GRE subdirectory and it's in the path. That's the other thing too. If you have your Java installed correctly, this directory is in your path. So it's a safe bet to just put it here. That way you know where it is. And you'll see, if you look in here, you see the DNS stuff. You see a bunch of other jar files in here. This is where it should go, technically. If I were looking for it on somebody else's computer, this is where I would look for it. So, if you don't load it here, you're going to get an error message. Not such a good thing. This is why I like MacBooks. I can have Windows, I can have PowerPoint. Let me go back to PowerPoint. Perfect. All right, so now I'm back to my PowerPoint presentation. And I've covered the two bullet points here. Explicitly loading the driver in this function called below here. We're going to try to avoid errors that might occur by using a try-catch. All of these source code examples I'm going to show you are going to use a try-catch. The first and utmost important step that you're going to do when you start using JDBC is load the driver. You can't get the driver loaded, you're in trouble. In the YouTube video I put a little sample program that will run through and demo for you that will actually show you basically it just does nothing more than loads the driver for you. When you load the driver, it's a simple command that you're giving it. You're creating a new instance. It's a driver object because now you have to think this is totally object oriented. So we're making a new instance of this driver object. Depending upon MySQL, depending upon Oracle, it's the same command statement. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to kind of skip through the source just for because I'm going to see it. We're going to see it in the next example in more detail. The next step is to obtain a connection to the database. It's one thing to load the driver, it's another thing to actually connect to the database. Connecting to the database is fairly simple. We connect a connection string, and the connection string has a username and a password associated with it. So the JDBC uses a uniform URL, Uniform Resource Locator. To specify the information that's required to establish the connection, you're going to be using a local host. If you have the Express version, and I'll show you the protocols for that and the exact string that you're going to use, it's going to be localhost. It's going to be probably the HR account, which is already given for you. So when you install this Express Edition, you have to unlock, and someone remind me if I forget when I go out to that Windows again. You unlock the HR account, and you can use that account for everything in this course. And you can create new tables in there. You can do all sorts of stuff. And you change the password to HR, and username is HR, password is HR. It's easy. Don't complicate things for you. If you really want to complicate stuff, you can use MySQL, go to GoDaddy, rent a website space, set up a MySQL database, and then put the URL in there for the location of the database, and you're going to connect to the database. Only problem is connectivity is going to run a little bit slower because you're going over an internet connection. When you go localhost, it's going to run lickety-split. Yeah, it's going to run much faster for you. In this particular example here, this is going to use localhost. And so it's going to be, again, with MySQL, Oracle, MySQL, username, password. I'm going to show you some examples that's going to break it out. So we have two different substrings that we'll use for username and password. In this particular case, it's manually sending password is equal to dbadmin. User is going to be equal to root in this case. So the JDBC token designates that this URL uses the JDBC protocol in terms of the string. So we got the string is equal to JDBC : MySQL for MySQL database. The MySQL token indicates that the subname address to the MySQL subprotocol, which specifies the MySQL database. The database itself is called RUBS. We're actually going to use the HR database instead, or excuse me, well, we're going to use the main. We'll see, I can't remember what we're going to use. Located in localhost. Actually, we're going to use the HR database. And it's going to be used in terms of the username, root, database admin. If you're installing the Oracle Express Edition, your root is not called root, it's not called admin, it's called system. So lowercase, it's actually case sensitive as well, system. When you install Oracle, you're going to be having to provide only one piece of information, and the entire install outside of the port and the directory to install it in is the password for the system account. Remember that password. If you forget the password, you're going to have to reinstall Oracle. No way to recover it, which is true, actually. You shouldn't have a way to recover it. So querying the database through an SQL query, assuming that the following book table exists. This is the book table. We're in the previous example. We're going to run a query, and it's going to check for the price with an ID of 81. This is just to refresh your memory. Select name, comma, price from book, where the example is going to run this particular query. And the query itself is going to be run on the database, and the JDBC driver. This is step number 3. So step number 1, we loaded the driver. Step number 2, we made the connection. Step number 3, we're going to prepare a statement. This is called a prepared statement. So we begin by declaring what's called a prepared statement. And the prepared statement is going to be another object with an optional argument where we have a question mark. This is actually going to show you the power, and there's different ways of doing this. We don't have to use a prepared statement. Well, actually, we have to send a statement. We have to create a statement object. But we don't have to use this technique, and I'll show you some more as we go through the course. The question mark basically allows us to substitute. So the concept is, in this orientation of JDBC, is let's minimize the connection. Let's minimize the communication that we have to do with the database. We're going to take full optimization over this driver capability. The best thing in the world is to send a query over to the database, have the database cache the query for us, prepare it ahead of time, let it sit there, and then all we do is send the parameters over. Simple little pieces of information, some text that we send over. It says, find a book with this author. Okay, now, that author, this other author, and you just keep sending it authors' names or something, or book numbers. And it fills in the question mark with the information that you sent it. It's a lot easier than running the same query all over again. In the ODBC days, shouldn't say pre-Windows XP, older days, you wanted to send a query, you just sent a query. And you sent the query again, and you sent the query again. And it was open the connection, sent the query, close the connection. Open this. Instead of all that opening and closing, all this that stuff, you load the driver, you make the connection object. Connection object has a life to it. It sticks around until you close the connection object. It stays open. You have what would be sort of a state for the transaction without actually a constant connection. Actually, there is no constant connection between you and the database, but there is. The driver is managing the session of you connecting, but you don't have the overhead on the network of the connection actually established, which is kind of interesting. It kind of makes it a little bit more streamlined as well. So once the parameters for the statement have been supplied through the values, they can be executed, and the results of the execution will be returned in what's called the results set. And so in this particular example, we're going to create a string, which is going to be the SQL statement, and the SQL statement is going to be that little statement we saw in the previous slide. And then here's a new object here. It's a prepared statement object that's going to be prepare statement with this text string here. Very common to see it done this way because then you can just use the same syntax, change the string when the query changes. Don't hard code it and put it in here. You can if you want to, but it's more work. And then here's the trick. We can send a dozen of these, and it would send for the parameter number 1 the ID. And the ID in this particular case is 81763. And so we can change the ID, we send it a new ID. We send it a new ID. So when we do it, what we're doing is we're sending and we're creating the result set rs, which is going to be equal to the statement. We're running the method executes off a statement. So execute the statement. That means go to the database, run the query, and then take the results and copy it to the result set object. And here's the fun part. When we get the result set object back, we just go next, next, next. Not only that, but the examples I'm going to show you is we can get the metadata, the data. We don't have to get all the data from it. We can just get the fields that we want, the first column, the second column. We have so many different built-in methods to deal with the data, a lot easier than in the old days. You know, in the old days, you got a result set back, and it was a string, and you parsed the string, and you figured out what format the string. You know, this is a number, this is a date, this is a, and you had to do all your work yourself. And then you took that and you converted it like it was a string that was a number 1, because everything was in the string. It's a string. You had to say, okay, to number. You know, you had to convert it to an integer value, to assign it to an integer variable. Here the data comes back as is. If it's a number, it's a number. If it's a date, it's a date. If it's a string, it's a string. And then it's true data that matches true Java data types. So there's no mix and match between the different data types. String is a string, it's a Java string. So it's actually a little bit easier because there's no translation, there's no manual work with that. So if one or more rows is returned, or is found, the result set next method returns true. If it doesn't return true, then you have instant error checking that comes back and says, oh, it's empty. If the result set's empty, most likely your query failed or something was a problem there. Or the item's not in there. You didn't come back with anything. So as the book IDs are unique, the maximum 1 row can be found from the previous query, hence the succession or check to see if a single if statement as opposed to a while loop. So it's going to be checked with a single statement. So once the database row has been obtained from the database, it's necessary to map the data to an object that we're going to use. Easily accomplished by creating a new instance corresponding to the row and using a mutator of some sort, some method, to assign the appropriate values to the appropriate entries. Here's an example where we have book, new object book is equal to new book ID, and the book.setBook. And here's the result set that we have the rs.set the string. This is the metadata. We have a column in that database. In the result set, we return because we said select name, comma, price in the query. Even if you don't remember the query, we did that. We can just say, give me the name. So it looks in the result set for the particular row that was returned and gives you the value that was set for the name. It gives you the value that was set for the price. And this is what I said. We're automatically setting the data without any translation. We don't have to go to string. We don't have to do anything. If it's a name, if it's a price, this is going to come back, get the float out of here, parse it, get the float from price, get the name, get the string from name. Automatic kind of translation there. And then print out there, if there's nothing in here, there is no book with the ID, this ID. So there are a number of more generic ways to accomplish this mapping as well. Keep in mind, keep things simple. We're going to be discussing further different things in the future. So now we have CRUD operations to consider. That one was the standard query with a result set. So with CRUD stands for create, update, and delete. It's a database term. These are different types of SQL statements that can be performed, handling corresponding or appropriate SQL statements. So we have the ability to deal with SQL statements in different ways, which is one thing that JDBC is giving us. So handling, constructing it, we can see since no result sets are expected when we do an update, except for OK or delete. Okay, 1 row deleted. We're not getting anything back that we're going to need to parse. There's no result set. So we can do what's called an execute query. And so this is the lighter weight version of the prepared statement. Actually, I mean, it's an execute a query. So instead of execute update method is used for update, execute query is for query. So query gives us, when we execute a query, we get a result set. When we execute an update, we don't get a result set back. So returns a number of rows that were successfully created or updated or deleted. So we have two executes, two execute modes. And here's an example of creating a row in a table. And we can see here we have a prepare statement, we have the statement itself. Here's the statement, insert a row, create a new row. And when we run it, we're going to do an execute update is the difference down here instead of an execute query. And this is going to be our rows inserted as an integer because this is going to return an integer, 1, 2, 3, depending upon how many rows we've actually updated, inserted, or deleted from the database. And so we can basically do a check, make sure that rows inserted is equal to 1 or larger than 1. Otherwise we know there was a failure or something that occurred. 1, 2, 1. No, this is giving you the position number. You're right, it should be 3. Yes, there's an error in the slide. Yes. The ID, the price should be 3. Yeah, this 1 should be 3. Yes. I need to correct that actually. So I'm not going to correct it right now, I'll correct it later. But, you're right. Actually, I've given this lecture before, and that's the first time I've seen it. Nobody else, I guess, is paying attention. So, well, it's hard to miss it, especially if you're going through it at the speed of light. So, deleting a row here, it's the same kind of concept where we've got an execute update, and we are deleting the 1 for the get ID, so that's correct. So, updating a row, where we're going to do an update, and this is correct, 1 and 2. Put in here correctly for the price and for the get ID. And price is first, ID is second in this particular case. And what we're looking at in the slides is the use of the execute update for the method. So this is the end of lecture number 1. I have a full JDBC lecture I'm going to start before I actually show you the examples because it's going to go through each one of these steps in a lot more detail. But I checked these links a couple of days ago, and it actually does work. If you wanted more information, I mentioned the DAO in the first part of this lecture and the design patterns. This link is actually not a bad source for design patterns if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. Also, if you want information on the history of objects, middleware, components, web stuff, this is not a bad link as well for information on those subjects. So let's take a deeper look at the concept of JDBC, and this lecture is actually called JDBC.ppt on the website. I believe it's probably under 3 or something, lecture 3 or 4. Lecture 2, there's a series of lectures actually. Let me just go back to show you. This will also be put into the. This will also be put on the LMS shortly. There we go. If I go to, let's just go to bhacker.com real quick. For those of you who do not have a programming background in Java, and if you go into the lecture directory, I'm going to skip this for the purposes of this course. However, lecture 2 is Introduction to Java. Yeah, 1, 2, and 3, Hello World. Installing Java, it's too low level. However, it's in here for those people who are coming from a C++ background or a C background. So I'm skipping it, and I'm going to this one right here, which is lecture 3, Introduction to. And I may or may not cover Introduction to MySQL. It's not bad reading actually, if you're interested. This lecture is not too bad. It's pretty short. And what I want to do is go through the basic fundamental parts and then show it to you live, so you can kind of see what's going on. So we've already done the introduction, so we don't really need to spend too much time on that. But we have 6 steps. So I want to reiterate the point of the 6 steps and then show it to you. So in example number 1 is setting up the tables. So example number 2, this is I'm going to hit these 2 bullet points, and I'm going to do the examples, and then I'll go to these examples. So we're going to go through the 6 steps, essentially, is the purpose of starting this lecture out. To give you the proper credit where credit is due, because I don't believe in not giving credit to due. This is not my slide set. This is not my fancy picture or my lecture set. This comes from this particular source right here. And the slides are coming from the Sun JDBC tutorial. This is the link. You may also find other tutorials at this link. This is just one of theirs, and this is actually a portion of it. I have edited it to take out some of the stuff that I felt was too rudimentary that I've covered already. Another good source of information, because we don't have a textbook for this course as I mentioned, but I will be giving you links throughout the course, is to go to the database programming with JDBC and Java O'Reilly text. In fact, I think this is now just by O'Reilly. I think the name changed. It's no longer an Associates. Excellent text, still in production, very nice. This one I would probably just stay away from, unless you really have an interest. Core web programming, kind of old. It hasn't been updated in a while, but if you have an old copy of it, don't buy a brand new copy, or don't buy a used copy of it somewhere. You'll get what you get out of it. It has a little bit on JDBC, but not much. So we've already talked about the connectivity. So I don't really have to spend too much time on the introduction of JDBC. The only thing to note in here that's a little bit different is the universal database access. It's not open database connectivity was developed to create single standards for the database access in the Windows environment. So if you notice, the driver actually does both. We've gone full 360 degrees around again. We started out with ODBC. And then we had ODBC and JDBC. Now we have OJDBC. But people still call it JDBC and they still call it ODBC. So are you on a single standalone computer, or on a remote environment? Or are you doing network connectivity, which is the difference between the O and the J. And the difference between the OJ is that the OJ does now the OD as well as the JD. So whether it's an open or whether it's a closed system, doesn't really matter. The API itself is simple, possible, maximum freedom, flexibility. This is how the driver actually works into this framework. So to connect to the database, you first need that driver, which is why we're installing it into that jar file, into that directory. It's a package, actually. It's basically giving us the driver connectivity. It's a set of classes and interfaces, which are all jarred together. It's like a compressed file with specific database engine, which is why you can load more than one JDBC driver. In fact, if you're looking at creating an application, and I just might put an example together for the next, probably not going to do it till next time, or maybe I'll just put it on the YouTube site. We can do a MySQL and an Oracle connectivity all in the same program. We just load 2 drivers. And we call one for this one, we call the one for that one. And the way this works is that we have the Java application, we have the driver manager, we have the JDBC, the ODBC bridge, we have the vendor-specific JDBC drivers, and then we have the database. And the reason why I sort of went with the Oracle route this time is because MySQL is actually by a third party. It's connector J is the driver, and this lecture set's going to talk about connector J, which is right here. So you don't have to follow these instructions if you're doing the Oracle route. And this slide set is all on MySQL, so we can give you both, essentially, background in both. So Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, Sybase, all of the major databases. In fact, you can get one from Microsoft Access. Why you'd want to use it, I don't know. It's kind of small scale, but for testing, if you don't have a, I don't know, you don't have the guts to install Oracle. MySQL, you could use Microsoft Access. Why not? It doesn't really give you too much of a client-server environment, though. For MySQL, in these particular examples, we're going to use the MySQL connector J, most popular for MySQL. And you can get at this download this link right here, which still works. I just tested it the other day. mysql.com/downloads/API JDBC. Kind of very similar how we went to the Oracle site and we downloaded the Oracle JDBC. To install the MySQL driver, I've already shown you the Oracle version of this. To use the MySQL driver, you're going to need to download the complete distribution, add the following jar file to your class path. This, believe it or not, is not as picky. It doesn't have to go in the JRE. It can go in the Java bin directory. And I've successfully put it in the Java bin directory many times and it works just fine. So this one actually is kind of easier to find, easier to load actually. So if you're having problems with the Oracle JDBC driver and you are fed up with Oracle and you want to install Apache server with MySQL, which they make for Windows actually, and I think I have a link in this lecture, you can download it. It's going to take up more memory on your computer though, but you might have an easier time with the driver. But I would just struggle with the Oracle and you'll figure it out. To use the driver with Tomcat, copy the following jar file. You actually have to put it, if you're going to use it with Tomcat, you're going to need to put it in this particular location, which is the library location off of root for the Tomcat server. Because it's really the server or it's really the JVM that's loading the driver. You're loading it into the operating environment. The program's not using it. It's just calling to it. What ends up happening is you make an instance of that object. And the object is out there and you're calling the object. So here's my lovely 6 steps that we're going to look at. Step number 1, loading the driver. Step number 2, establishing the database connection. Creating the statement object, executing the query, processing the results, and closing the connection. So step number 1, loading the driver. Formally, to give you the syntax, because I did not go through the source code already, to use the JDBC driver, you must load the driver via the class.forName method. So it's a method on the class object of the driver. The general code looks like this. This is going to vary. This has actually become a lot simpler. We no longer have driver versions anymore, thank God. Because every time the driver version changed, all of a sudden the version number changed in the code. Now we just call it MySQL, or we call it Oracle. Generic. And then we can update the driver without having to recompile the source code. I don't know why they thought about putting the numbers in there. But XYZ, but in the old days, you're not going to see this XYZ here anymore, and not currently. If you're using the JDBC ODBC driver, your code's going to look like this. We're going to actually see this in our example because we are using an ODBC/JDBC driver from Oracle. And so it's going to have, and I'll show you in the source code examples what it actually looks like. Loading the MySQL driver, if we're using the MySQL driver, your code's going to look like this. This is exactly what we saw in the last lecture. It's the com MySQL JDBC driver. And we're going to throw an exception automatically, and the exception that we're going to throw is the class not found exception. This is kind of, they always say it's good practice. This is a must. If you don't have a connection, you might as well just stop the program right there. That's a requirement. But you can get away without putting that in there, that exception handling. But the exception handling is built in for you. If the throw is actually already there, it's part of the exception handling package, use it, because it's there for you. And this will save you a lot of heartache in the end. The catch is going to be basically in the try-catch formats to throw the exception. And I'm going through this kind of a little fast. Stop me if I go through too fast. I'm just doing this because I'm going to show you the real examples in a few minutes. And people usually get bored with this. So establish the connection. When we establish it, once you have loaded the JDBC driver, the next step is to actually create the connection. You're going to use the following code, name, and password. I'm going to have a slightly different way of doing this for you where I'm just going to put string names in here, and you can type in, you can ask the user, enter your name, enter your password. You can make it more generic instead of hard coding it. Highly recommended to actually make it so you can put in command line arguments or to put in generic stuff, because then you make a more universal object. You don't have to recompile every time your password changes, something like that. So creating the connection URL is the next step. Only difficulty is establishing a connection is specifying the correct URL. If you don't specify the correct URL, you're not going to get a good connection. So in general, URL takes on this following format: the subprotocol : the subname. This is the format we're going to use. And JDBC indicates that this is a JDBC connection. No mystery there. JDBC. The subprotocol identifies the driver you want to use. MySQL, Oracle. The subname identifies the database name. We're going to use XE for Express Edition, which is the name of our database in Oracle. And the location, well, it's going to be in localhost. So we'll see how that syntax works together. If we were using ODBC, this would be JDBC ODBC Fred, the name of the database. So in this example, the following code uses this bridge connected to a database called Fred. And we have the URL with the URL here is a string. We put this in as the URL. This could be a web address, could be an IP address as well in there. depending upon the location of where Fred happens to be located. Here it is here it is actually a better example here. This is a local host. It could be www.bhacker.com/web database, whatever my database was called. And then we would establish the connection in the very same way. In this case, what we're using is the JDBC, not the ODBC bridge, and the database name is web database located at localhost. So it executes the code connection, and you'll have a connection object for communicating directly with the database. And now we're going to do creating a statement object, because we have to have an object that represents the statement regardless of what we're going to do with it. Whether we're going to execute an update or we're going to execute a query. So the JDBC statement object sends the SQL statements to the database, and we are going to connect from an active connection object. So for example, statement, we have con for our connection. So we have connection con. This is why it's kind of labeled this way. It helps you. Con.create statement is going to create a statement object. This is the method running from the connection to say, you know, you object, run this method to create a statement. We're going to use this statement. We're going to send it to this connection. So the statement object can be issued with SQL calls directly to the database. And then we execute the query. So here's our execute query. Executes the SQL query and returns the data to the table. And the table is going to be the results set that's going to come out of it. And the resulting table may be emptied, but never null. It never comes back as null, but it could be empty. It's not null because we've actually added something to it, but what did we add to it? Nothing. So it's empty. So the result set is equal to the statement.execute query select, and we just put the query in here, select A and B from table. And then we see our corresponding execute update, our other option, where we're going to execute an insert, an update, or delete, and we're going to return the number of rows, so that gets added to an integer, essentially. So it supports the data definition language versus data manipulation language, DMLs versus the DDLs, if you like that terminology. So some useful statement methods. This we haven't seen yet, and this is useful for troubleshooting and for figuring out what did you get from the result set. We have a method that says get the maximum rows or set the maximum rows. What if we have 10 million items that came back? You know, that's a long query. In fact, your program will probably hang, but what if you just want the first 10 or the first 20? Then you can set the maximum rows that come back from the result set, or you can get the maximum rows.
Set top 10
Yeah, I'm sorry? Yeah, you can get the top 10 or something. If you were running a query on the internet, this is what you'd be doing. If you were getting something from a database that had millions and millions and millions of search results, perhaps, you don't want all of them. All of them is going to take up a lot of memory. It's going to take a long time to retrieve all of them. So to determine the number of rows a result set may contain, unless explicitly set, the number of rows are unlimited. So the return value is going to be 0 for that method. Get a query timeout. Set a query timeout. So if you haven't set the maximum number of rows that's coming back, after 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, wow, that's not even acceptable. How long is it? Users not going to wait that long. User on an internet application, they're going to wait 2 seconds or 3 seconds. If it doesn't come back, they're going to close the page, or they're going to press the back button or something. So you can set the timeout where it's going to come back and say, I'm sorry, can you redefine your query a little bit? We didn't find what you're looking for. Or, and this would be not only for retrieving the result sets, but also for running the query. If the database is having an issue, the database is timed out, something is going on, basically it's going to wait for the result set to come back. And if the result set doesn't come back in a certain amount of time, it's going to come back with an error. And specifies the amount of time the driver will wait for a statement to complete before throwing an SQL exception error. Not to say that an SQL exception occurred. It will occur if a timeout occurs before the result set is returned. Maybe a valid query, but there might be a database issue. There might be a connectivity issue or some slow connection or something of that nature. This helps the interface of your application become less buggy feeling, more in control. Processing the results, step number 5, the result set contains the results of the SQL query. We have some useful methods that we can apply upon this object, and it all throws an SQL exception. So SQL exception is what we're really looking at in terms of the result set. We can close, releases the JDBC and the database resources. The result set is automatically closed when the associated statement object executes a new query, which is interesting. It just automatically does. You don't have to close and open and close and open. And the get metadata object is another one. Returns the result set metadata. And I have an example actually that's going to show you how to do that, where the object contains information about the columns in the result set. And now we have our result set. Continued in terms of useful methods. The next, which we've seen already, is a quick way of going through each one, and I have an example that's going to show us how to do that. Attempts to move to the next row in the result set. So you just go next, next, next. And you just do a dot next, essentially. It moves to the next row. If successful, otherwise it returns false. If it's true, it returns successful. The first call to next, position cursor to the first row. So you start, the first next actually positions it to the first row, the next one positions it to the second row. So it really starts with 0, kind of, sort of. But first one it retrieves is 1. So it's kind of interesting. Some other useful methods would be a find column or a get. And I have a couple of examples that are going to be using this as well. The find column returns the corresponding integer value corresponding to the specific column name. 1, 2, 3. Column numbers in the result set do not necessarily map to the same column numbers in the database. It depends on the query. The result set is formatted in the same order in which you ran your query. And the get XXX is going to return the value of the column specified by the column name or the column index as the column number or Java type. So returns 0 or null if the value is an SQL null, because we do have nulls in SQL. We just don't have them in JDBC. So if we get a null coming back from the result set, we can use it. It's not out of the question. And we can get types of double, date, short, object, byte, string. So we can get the type. Select star is going to give us everything in the database, and it's probably going to be in this. Hopefully, it's going to be in the same order as the date. Yeah. But unfortunately, you'd have to read the metadata first to figure out the order. The star is not going to tell you very much. How do you know, as the application developer? And that brings up a really good point. You, as the application developer, probably didn't create the database. Unless you've been working for that company for a long time and you wear many hats. You're probably not the DBA. You're the application developer. So someone's going to hand you a piece of paper, and you actually have to kind of, figure out the logic yourself, which is kind of a challenge in itself. Because sometimes the database documentation is not represented by whoever updated something and changed something and added a column and, manipulated a database, maintaining it, quote unquote, without actually documenting it at the same time. So, to close the database connection, we do a statement close, and we also do a connection close. You can close the statement manually if you want. Otherwise, every time you run a new statement, it closes automatically. The connection close does not close automatically. So, yeah, just the statement does. So, connection close is necessary. Some application servers, such as the VEA WebLogic, maintain a pool of database connections. So this is much more efficient, as applications do not have the overhead of constantly opening and closing database connections. If we already have a pool available for us, we just connect to the pool. We don't have to worry about opening and closing and stuff like that. So this is where I said I'm going to stop with the PowerPoint. So example number 1, setting up the table. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do it. Instead, we're going to go out here to Windows. Windows on a Mac. This is running in a virtual machine, actually. Believe it or not, it runs pretty fast, actually. If you go to the YouTube websites, or you go to the link from bhacker.com and you look at the Oracle install, you're going to find the Oracle install lecture and the JDBC lecture, and there's this little README file. It's going to have a bunch of notes in it for you. And you're also going to have another one. And in the other file that's going to be listed right underneath the video, actually, there's a link for it. It's going to be called JDBC Test Oracle. You can easily change this to JDBC Test MySQL by changing everything where it says Oracle to MySQL and change the database name. The program that it's loading up in is a program called JGrasp. And I believe in one of the videos I actually... Are you familiar? Okay. Have you watched the video? Oh, good. So you know what I'm talking about. All right, so you can correct me if I've made any inconsistencies. So, Yeah. I show you both. I like I like this one because of the color coding actually.
This one.
Yeah, I like JGrasp.
But even Eclipse also.
Eclipse color codes too. Yeah. But this one, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Sometimes I like to change the program, I guess. So. Interesting thing that I also do. You also watch the part about opening and starting and stopping, because I'm going to show you right now the database should not be running because I turned it off. I recommend that you turn off in the services. If you haven't watched the video, I show you how to look at the services, and then we're going to notice what's going to happen with this JDBC driver. I'm going to show you it not running correctly in the beginning because the database isn't running. And if the database isn't running, it means that these guys are manually, but they're not started. The status is empty. And the two that we're concerned with is Oracle XE, which is our database actually, and the listener. Those two are not running, they're manual. So my database, my Oracle is down right now. And I'm going to run this example here. Let me zoom in a little bit just to, oh, that's nice. So this is an Oracle test. This is nothing more, and you have to unlock the user account HR. And I highly recommend following the video to unlock the account. I won't repeat that because you've already seen that. You unlocked your HR account? No? Oh, okay, hold back. Hold on one second. In the database, you're going to get this little icon, this beautiful little icon. Actually, I like the icon that shows up on the desktop after you install Oracle.
Even 10G,
11G does the same icon.
same.
It looks the same. You click on it, it's the same file actually. It's the same program, 10G, 11G. If you go into this this file and you go down here, it says unlock the sample user accounts and follow the instructions. It's going to be using the web interface to the database. Yeah, and I'm going to show you the web interface in a few minutes, but follow unlock the sample user account. This way you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create anything. You already have sample tables that you can work with, and my examples are working with the sample tables. Yeah. You don't have to create anything to test this thing. You know, eventually you're going to want to create stuff. And there's 3 examples that you're going to require that you create a table for it. But it's a simple table, and I give you the SQL query for it. Yeah, I'm going to give you the query so you can just cut and paste it, and I'll show you how to cut and paste it. But long story short, in order to run the test that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, you have to unlock the HR accounts if you have not done that already. And it's given for you. Everybody who installs it gets this. Don't delete this icon that shows up on your desktop because it's nice little tutorials in here. So unlocking the sample, it's called an HR account, and I have actually entered a password of HR. So lowercase HR, makes it easier to remember. When you unlock it, it'll ask you to change the password if you want, stuff like that. And you can look at logging in as a sample user and creating a sample application. And going back to no textbook, this is your textbook for the Oracle. This is a great tutorial to run through so to get familiar with Oracle, and I highly recommend doing that actually. So I'm going to go back to this example and just kind of tell you what it's doing real quick, and then we'll run it and we'll see what happens because the database is not loaded. The service is not loaded right now by default because I don't want it to take up too many resources on my computer.
Do you have client software?
This is the client. We are a client. This is a client program. Oh, I'll show you that. You want to see that?
That is regular, the general Oracle client.
Yeah, there's two general clients for it. There's a
SQL
SQL command screen for it, and there's also a web interface to it. Have you seen the web interface yet? Oh, I'll show it to you next. I have to start the database, so I'll show it to you next. Yeah, there's a really nice cut and paste web interface.
Third-party client tool like .PO, that is a third party. You can connect all of any database.
Oh yeah, no, there's a ton of third-party tools out there. Huh? Toad?
Toad,
Yeah. No, yeah, there's a ton of third-party. I don't actually like them. I mean, you can use them if you want. You can.
But for this one, Oracle,
And for Oracle, you don't need anything. Yeah, I'll show you in a few minutes. Yeah, I want to kind of demo this connectivity first, and then I'll give you a little tour when we end this, but before we take a break. But Oh yeah, no. You don't need any of those tools. There's people who go crazy. They go out and they install all these clients to go configuration, PHP admin, all this stuff, you know, to kind of, and you don't need any of that stuff, actually. In fact, if you have the full version, not the Express, you get the web interface. There's a web server that's actually installed with this too. You can actually create your own Oracle web. In fact, if you have an open port on your computer, you can connect to it from another computer as well. If you open it up on your router and open up 8080, then you have a web server. You have a database server. Yeah, it's a full version actually. In fact, if you're so inclined, if you're taking the Unix class, install it on a Unix box and connect to it. And you'll find it's just like a real Oracle. It's a real Oracle system. So. Okay, so this is our test JDBC, and we can see here this is what it looks like. I've shown this to you for the MySQL in the lecture, so I thought maybe I'd just show you the Oracle. Looks identical except for the word Oracle is replaced instead of MySQL. Actually, it says Oracle driver and Oracle right here. And what we're doing here is the same thing. We're checking to see if the class is found. If the object exists, we're going to make an instance of it. The object is there, and we can make an instance of it, but we're not going to be able to connect because the database isn't up. So we're going to actually get the error message here is where we're going to get it. And we're going to open up the database connection, and here's this kind of statement here. This is the new one here, and I broke it out into, this is all one statement, hard-coded, and I put it onto different lines to make it easier to read. I called the password HR, and the login name is HR, and so I'm going to run JDBC :Oracle :thin, which is kind of different. This is what I thought I'd show you to you. This is the thin, how do I do that? Thin client. It's, well, right now just take it as syntax. And this is the local host with the established support. Cut and paste this and use this for your default configuration.
The port is on the same.
It's always going to be the same, yeah. And XE is the name of the database. So just kind of use this as a template, I should say. If you're using Oracle, this is what you're going to need to do. And this file is included with the video. And here's our query. The jobs table is in part of the HR tables list. And we're going to execute a query here by making a statement. This is the same as the PowerPoints I just showed you a few minutes ago. And then we're going to do while, and this is kind of typical syntax, while rs.next. There is a row. We're going to print out Oracle query, and then we're going to get string 1. And we're going to get string 2. And then what we're going to get is 1 is going to be, in our query, we said, where's my query? Here's my query. I have my cursor on it right now. Select star from jobs. I only have one column that's coming back. No, excuse me, I have multiple columns coming back. The first column is going to be the job name, I think, but I'll find out. When I show you the web interface, I'll show it to you. We'll examine that. But this is going to get the name of the first, it's going to bring back the string of the values that are in the first column. And then we're going to close the connection, and then we're going to check for SQL errors. So if I'm in, this is another thing why I like the JGrasp kind of interface is all of the output's going to show down here. So if I run this here, make this a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. If I build it, I'm not sure if I have it built yet. We're going to see if the operation was complete. If I run it, we're going to see, recoverable exception IO. The network adapter could not establish the connection. Yeah, so by putting the error code in there, this is a demonstration of, my driver loaded. I didn't get a driver error. And you can easily test that by, yeah, because my database isn't loaded. So this is telling me that I'm getting a SQL error because I can't connect. So I'm going to go down and actually start it. So if I go down to Programs, Oracle, Start My Database, it's going to start the background service for the listener, and it's also going to start the Oracle service for the XE database. And now when I run it, it should work correctly. This is probably the hardest part of troubleshooting, is do I have the correct URL for the database? Do I have the correct driver? Is the driver loading? And is the connection actually being established? So you can actually test for all three of these errors by messing up the string, and then you'll see what happens with the connection. Removing the driver, or loading it with the database not loaded. So I can just close this window now. Now when I run it, I should get a list of the items that are in the first column. And here they are. Oracle query. This stuff is given for you automatically in that HR account which you unlocked. You don't have to create the table, you don't have to do anything. So where is that HR account? Let me go show you real quick here. If I go Start Menu, I go to Oracle, and I hit on this one here. It's Go to Database Homepage. Go to Database Homepage is going to be my option here. If I go to the database homepage, I get an internet browser that's going to show up. Yep, here it is, Firefox. And this is going to my, I think I have it on 8080. I think I have it on 80 or something. I can't remember. What, 81 or something, or 80? Let's see what happens. It should bring it up. Okay, 8080. Okay, good. Leave this alone. You could actually change the location. You can change the port if you want. Why bother? So I'm going to log in as HR. So I'm going to go HR. HR is my password. I'm going to put login. This is the easiest, the best interface I've ever seen, actually. Once you figure out where everything is, this is much better than the other option, which is the command line interface.
That is very good.
Well, yeah. Let me just show you real quick. For those of you who are watching the video who haven't seen this yet, you could run SQL command line, and here's your other choice. Yeah, if you do that, you got to go connect HR, password HR, and then this is what you're stuck with. So if you went, select star from jobs, you get this. Not so user-friendly. Type in exit. Don't leave that connection open depending upon your computer. And mine actually, I tested it the other day and I was able to establish multiple connections. But I think it's because I'm on the same client, same IP address. Yeah. I believe you're going to get an error message that says only one simultaneous because it's the free edition. Where you're going to find all the stuff for your objects that are created is going to be in the object browser. If you click on the object browser, in the left-hand window, we're going to see this job tables. If I click on the job tables, I'm going to see it show up on the right-hand side. Isn't this much easier to look at? Yeah. If I click on these tabs up here, a lot of people miss the tabs. If I click up on the tab, lo and behold, what do I see? This is the information that is in this window. This add press, add underscore VP, add press, oops, wrong window. Add press, add VP. This is the data that's in here. Here's another reason why I like this.
Yeah, this is
If I go into the SQL, click on the SQL window here. I can type in, here's the data, here's the SQL. Actually, this isn't where you're going to type stuff in. I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. This is where you can actually see the SQL that was created. But you don't have to use this. You can actually drag and drop and manually configure and change things without writing a single line of SQL code. Just by clicking on jobs, as an example, clicking on a table, and adding a column, modifying a column, renaming a column. You can totally modify this without touching SQL at all. Let's say you have SQL. If I go back to home, and this is the weird part for the navigation, you think you're kind of stuck here. But up here you got this navigation. If I go back to home, and I see this little window that says SQL on it, click on SQL. This is not the same screen that we looked at before. It's a better screen, actually. SQL. Because if I did this over here as an example, I have this screen here. Let me make it a little bit bigger, smaller, so you can kind of see the whole thing in one view. I'm going to make it a little bigger. If I type in select star jobs in this window, press return, nothing happens. I have to go over here and set run, but I can save, which you can't save in the other window. Yeah. Well, watch this. Watch this. See how ugly that black screen was? See how nice this one looks? This is our output. Looks a lot better than. Oh, I think I closed it already. Than the command line interface, the black one. Yeah, no, this is much easier. And not only that, if I have, for example, let me do this. If I have, this is the part you're going to love, actually. In the second part, after we take a short break, few minutes here. I'm going to go through some more examples. But let's say I wanted to create a table stars, and I said, hey, you know, this example is going to use this table stars. I've selected it. I've pressed copy. I can come over here, and I can press paste. You can't copy and paste into that black window in the command line window. You can't copy and paste in there. So if I do that and I go run, I think the table is already created. It says name is already used by existing object. I've already created it. And this allows me to kind of save it and then the auto commit is actually pressed, which means I don't have to worry about typing in commit or anything like that. And commit means to save the changes that I've been making. Yeah. So imagine if you wanted to add a bunch of data to that, you just cut and paste it and you put it in here. So much easier than using the command line interface. So let's see. I can actually continue unless you want a break.
5 minutes.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, I will continue with more JDBC examples.